Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel far back in time to a world that was very different from the one we live in today. A world of stone houses, wooden villages, candlelight, and long quiet nights, the Middle Ages. But instead of focusing on kings, knights, or great battles, tonight we will explore something much quieter and more personal. The place where people ended their day, their bedrooms. Now when we imagine medieval life, we often think about castles and armour, but most people in the Middle Ages did not live in castles at all. They lived in small wooden houses, cottages, and simple stone buildings scattered across villages and countryside. And the bedrooms inside those homes were nothing like the bedrooms we know today. In fact, many medieval bedrooms would probably seem very strange to us. Some were tiny and dark, some were shared by entire families, some had beds made from straw, and some didn't really have a bedroom at all. Tonight we will slowly explore what those bedrooms were really like, how people slept, what their beds were made of, why their sleeping arrangements might surprise us, and how medieval nights felt when the world outside was dark, cold, and silent. But before we begin our journey into these strange medieval bedrooms, I have a small request. A lot of people watch these videos to relax, unwind, or fall asleep. But many viewers forget to subscribe, so if you enjoy calm history videos like this, and you would like to support the channel, consider subscribing. It really helps this small channel grow, and if you want, you can also leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from tonight. It's always interesting to see where people around the world are listening from. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, maybe dim the lights a little, and let's slowly step into a quiet medieval house. Our story begins in a small village somewhere in Europe, around the 13th century. The sun has already disappeared behind the hills, the sky is turning dark blue, and inside a small wooden house, a family is preparing for the night. The house itself is simple. It has wooden walls, a packed earth floor, and a small fire burning inside a stone hearth. The fire is the heart of the home. It provides warmth, light, and a place to cook food. But it also plays another important role, because when the fire slowly burns through the night, it helps keep the house from becoming unbearably cold. In medieval times, insulation did not exist the way it does today. Walls were thin, windows were small, and cold air could easily slip inside. This meant that nights could become very chilly, especially during autumn and winter. Now, imagine the bedroom, or rather, what passed for a bedroom. In many medieval homes there was not a separate bedroom at all. Instead, the entire family slept in the same room where they spent the day. Parents, children, sometimes even grandparents, everyone sleeping close together in the same shared space. This may sound unusual today, but for medieval families it was normal, and there were good reasons for it. First, houses were small. Building materials were expensive and labour was difficult. Most villagers could only afford a single main room. Second, sleeping together helped keep everyone warm. Human body heat was valuable during cold nights. Sleeping close together meant less heat lost to the air. And third, it was simply part of everyday life. Privacy was not a concept that people thought about the same way we do today. The idea of having your own personal bedroom was something only the wealthy could enjoy. But even when people did have a separate bedroom, it still looked very different from a modern one. Let's take a closer look at the most important object in any bedroom, the bed. Today, beds are soft, carefully designed pieces of furniture, but medieval beds could be surprisingly simple. In poorer homes, the bed might not even be a bed frame at all. Instead, it could simply be a pile of straw placed on the floor. The straw would be covered with a cloth or rough blanket, and that was where someone would sleep. Straw mattresses were actually quite common in the Middle Ages. They were cheap, easy to replace, and the straw provided a little bit of cushioning. But over time, straw mattresses could become uncomfortable. The straw would flatten, dust and insects might collect inside, and sometimes the mattress would need to be completely replaced. Still, compared to sleeping directly on the hard floor, a straw mattress was a welcome improvement. For slightly wealthier families, beds became a little more elaborate. These beds might have wooden frames. They could be raised slightly off the ground, and sometimes they included ropes or wooden slats to support the mattress. But even these beds were much simpler than modern ones. Mattresses were often filled with straw, wool, or feathers, depending on how wealthy the household was. A feather mattress, known as a feather bed, was considered quite luxurious. Feathers were soft and comfortable, but they were also expensive, so most ordinary people slept on straw or wool instead. And then there were the blankets. Medieval blankets were usually made from wool. Wool was warm, durable, and widely available. Even when nights were cold, wool blankets helped trap body heat and keep sleepers warm. Sometimes families also slept wearing some of their clothes to stay comfortable through the night. Now imagine the room again. The fire is slowly fading. The last candle flickers softly. Outside, the village is quiet, and inside the house, the family begins settling down to sleep. One child curls up near the wall. Another lies beside their parents. Someone pulls a rough wool blanket a little closer around their shoulders. The room smells faintly of wood smoke and straw, and the only sound is the soft crackling of the fire. For medieval people, this was the rhythm of night. Simple, quiet, and very different from the modern world. But the story of medieval bedrooms does not stop here, because for wealthier families, sleeping arrangements could become far more unusual. Some beds had curtains, some beds were huge pieces of furniture, and in castles and manor houses, bedrooms could become spaces of both comfort and status. The 4-poster bed stood quietly in the corner of the chamber, its tall wooden posts rising toward the dark ceiling beams. Unlike the simple straw mattresses found in poorer homes, this bed looked almost like a piece of architecture inside the room. Its frame was made from thick oak wood, polished by years of use. Carved patterns decorated the posts, small details that showed the skill of the craftsman who had built it many years before. Above the bed stretched a wooden canopy frame. From this frame hung heavy fabric curtains that could be pulled closed at night. During the day, the curtains were often tied back, allowing air and light to move through the room. But when night arrived, those curtains became something very important. They created a small pocket of warmth. Medieval houses were rarely well insulated. Cold air slipped through cracks in wooden walls and stone blocks. Windows were small and often covered with thin cloth or wooden shutters, rather than glass. Because of this, even wealthy houses could feel cold after sunset. So when someone prepared for sleep, they would climb into the bed and slowly draw the curtains closed around them. Inside that small enclosed space, their body heat and thick blankets would trap warmth. It was a simple but clever solution to a very real problem, and it made sleeping through long winter nights far more comfortable. Now imagine the chamber around the bed. The room itself was not especially large. A wooden chest stood near the wall. Inside it were folded garments, wool cloaks, and perhaps a few personal belongings. Clothing was expensive in medieval times, so most people owned only a small number of garments. A narrow wooden bench rested beside the chest. This might be used for sitting while dressing in the morning. The floor beneath everything was made of wooden planks, slightly uneven from years of use. In some homes, dried rushes or straw were scattered across the floor. These rushes helped absorb dirt and moisture. They also added a small amount of insulation against the cold wood. In one corner of the room, a candle burned slowly. The flame flickered gently, casting soft shadows along the walls. Candles were precious items. They were usually made from tallow, a type of animal fat. Because they were valuable, people tried not to waste them. Often the candle would be extinguished shortly after everyone climbed into bed. Once the flame disappeared, darkness would fill the room. And medieval darkness was very different from modern darkness. There were no electric lights glowing outside the window, no distant street lamps, no quiet hum of machines, only the faint glow of embers from a dying fire somewhere in the house, and the soft sounds of the night. Perhaps the wind moving through the village, perhaps the distant bark of a dog, or the quiet shifting of animals in a nearby barn. Inside the four-poster bed, thick wool blankets covered the sleeper. Wool was the most common material used for bedding. It held warmth very well. Some wealthier households also used feather-filled mattresses, which were softer and more comfortable than straw. But even then, bedding was layered carefully. A linen sheet might lie closest to the body. Above it, heavy wool blankets added warmth. And sometimes an additional fur covering might be placed on top during the coldest months. Sleeping positions were often slightly different from what we might expect today. Many medieval people did not lie completely flat. Instead, they rested with their upper body slightly raised using bolsters or folded blankets. This position was thought to aid breathing and digestion. In fact, paintings from the period sometimes show sleepers resting in a gently propped position, rather than stretched out completely. The four-poster bed also served another purpose. It protected sleepers from insects. During warmer months, small biting insects could become a nuisance inside homes. Curtains created a barrier that helped keep many of them away. This made sleep far more peaceful during summer nights. But perhaps the most interesting thing about medieval beds is how valuable they were. A large bed with carved posts, curtains, and feather mattresses could be one of the most expensive pieces of furniture in an entire house. In some households, the bed was treated almost like a treasured possession. It might even be passed down through generations. When someone wealthy wrote a will, they sometimes listed their bed as one of the items to be inherited. Beds were also occasionally moved from house to house. Servants could dismantle the wooden frame and transport it when a family changed residence. Imagine the effort involved in carrying such a large piece of furniture through narrow medieval streets or along muddy country roads. Yet families were willing to do this because the bed represented comfort, warmth, and status. Now the night grows deeper. The candle in the corner has been extinguished. Only faint moonlight filters through the small window. Inside the four-poster bed, the curtains are drawn closed. The blankets hold warmth close to the sleeper. Outside the bed, the room slowly cools as the night air settles into the house. The wooden beams creak softly as the building shifts with the changing temperature. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls from the dark countryside, and inside the bed, wrapped in layers of wool and quiet darkness, the sleeper drifts slowly toward rest. But not everyone in medieval households enjoyed such comfortable sleeping arrangements. For many servants and workers living in these same houses, the night looked very different. Their beds were smaller, their rooms colder, and sometimes they slept not in private chambers at all, but in hallways, kitchens, or beside the great hall fire. Beyond the quiet comfort of the four-poster bed, the rest of the house slowly settled into a different kind of night. While the wealthy family members rested behind thick curtains and layered blankets, the servants and workers prepared for sleep in far simpler conditions. In a large medieval house, life did not stop when the sun went down. There were still small tasks to finish. The fire needed to be managed, doors secured, animals checked, and once everything was finally done, only then could the servants think about resting. But unlike their masters, they did not have private chambers waiting for them. Instead, they slept wherever space could be found. In many homes, servants slept in the great hall itself. This was the main room of the house, where meals were eaten and daily life unfolded. During the day it was busy and full of activity, but at night it became quiet and dim. Long wooden tables stood empty, benches were pushed aside, and near the fading fire servants would begin preparing their sleeping places. Some laid down simple straw mattresses, others used folded blankets or even cloaks as bedding. A few might sleep directly on wooden benches. Comfort was not the priority. Warmth and rest were. The hearth played an important role here as well. Even after the main fire burned low, the remaining embers still gave off a small amount of heat, so those who slept closest to the hearth had the warmest places. Naturally, these spots were often taken first. Others settled further away, where the air was cooler and the stone floor felt harder beneath them. In colder seasons, servants sometimes slept fully clothed. Wool cloaks doubled as blankets, hoods were pulled low to keep in warmth, and shoes might even be kept close by. just in case they needed to rise quickly during the night. Sleep for servants was often lighter. They needed to be ready. If something happened during the night, they might be called upon immediately. A sound in the courtyard, a problem with the fire, or the needs of their master. So even in rest, there was a quiet sense of awareness. Now imagine the great hall in darkness. The last candle has been extinguished. The fire glows faintly, and shapes of sleeping figures lie scattered across the room, some near the hearth, some along the walls, some curled beneath rough blankets. The room smells faintly of smoke, wood, and straw. And outside, the night continues in silence. But not all servants slept in the hall. In larger households, some were given small sleeping spaces in narrow upper rooms or attic areas. These spaces were often low and cramped. Wooden beams slanted overhead. The air could feel close and still. In winter, these rooms became very cold. In summer, they could become warm and stuffy. Beds here were simple: a straw mattress, a rough blanket, sometimes nothing more than a wooden platform with a covering. Yet even these small spaces offered something valuable: a bit of separation, a small corner of quiet away from the main hall. In castles, sleeping arrangements could be even more varied. Guards might sleep in towers or along stone corridors, always ready to respond if needed. Kitchen workers might rest near the kitchens themselves, so they could begin work early the next morning. And some servants slept in shared rooms, side by side, with little space between them. Privacy, once again, was not something most people expected. Life was shared. Space was shared. Even sleep was shared. And yet, despite these differences in comfort, there was a certain rhythm to medieval nights that touched everyone. As the hours passed, the entire household, from the lord in his chamber to the servant by the hearth, became part of the same quiet world, the same darkness, the same slow passing of time, the same distant sounds of wind and night creatures beyond the walls. Sometimes sleep itself was not continuous. Many historians believe that medieval people often slept in two separate periods: a first sleep and a second sleep. After several hours of rest, they might wake briefly during the night. During this quiet waking time, some people prayed, some thought about the day, some simply lay still, listening to the silence, and after a while they would drift back into sleep again. This pattern may have felt natural in a world without artificial light. Night was long, and the body followed its own gentle rhythm. Now the fire in the great hall has almost completely faded. Only a soft glow remains. The air has grown colder, and the house is still. Every person rests in their own place, some in comfort, some in simplicity, but all under the same quiet medieval sky. And as the night deepens, the difference between rich and poor fades slightly, because in darkness, with eyes closed and minds drifting, everyone shares the same simple need: rest. And somewhere beyond the walls, the first faint hint of morning slowly begins its journey toward the village. But the night is not yet over. There are still more stories hidden in these strange medieval bedrooms. In many medieval homes, the idea of a private bedroom did not truly exist. Instead of separate sleeping spaces, entire families shared the same room, often sleeping side by side through the long night. This arrangement was not unusual. It was simply the way life was lived. The house itself was usually small, built with limited materials and simple design. There was often just one main room where everything happened: cooking, eating, working, and finally sleeping. As evening arrived and darkness slowly filled the space, the room would begin to change its purpose. Tools were set aside, food was cleared, the fire was adjusted to last through the night, and one by one, the family members prepared for rest. Sleeping spaces were arranged carefully. A straw mattress might be placed near the warmest part of the room. Another bundle of bedding laid closer to the wall. Children often slept beside their parents. Younger ones kept close for warmth and safety. Older children might sleep just a little further away, but still within the same shared space. In colder months, this closeness was not just a matter of comfort, it was necessary. Medieval houses struggled to hold heat. The fire could only warm a small area, so the warmth of bodies became important. Sleeping close together helped everyone stay warmer. Blankets were shared, cloaks were pulled over multiple sleepers, and sometimes even animals played a role in this nightly arrangement. In some rural homes, small animals like dogs, cats, or even chickens might find their way inside at night. Their presence added a small amount of warmth to the room. It may seem unusual today, but in a world without central heating, every bit of warmth mattered. Now imagine lying in such a room. The fire has burned low, leaving behind a soft orange glow. The air smells faintly of smoke and straw. Around you, the quiet breathing of others fills the space. Someone shifts slightly under a blanket. A child murmurs softly in their sleep. The wooden walls creak gently as the night air cools the structure. There is no silence as we know it today. Instead, there is a constant, gentle presence of sound. But for medieval people, this was normal. It was familiar, and perhaps even comforting. Sleeping alone in total silence might have felt far more unsettling. Another interesting aspect of these shared sleeping arrangements was the lack of strict schedules. Without clocks, people followed the natural rhythm of light and darkness. They went to sleep when the night became deep, and they woke when the first light of morning appeared. But as mentioned before, sleep was not always continuous. Many people experienced what historians call segmented sleep. They would rest for several hours, then wake briefly during the night. In these quiet moments, the room would feel different. The fire might be almost out, the air cooler, the darkness deeper. Some might sit up for a short while. Others might whisper quietly, or simply lie still, thinking, listening, waiting for sleep to return. This natural pause in the night created a different relationship with rest. Sleep was not a single long stretch. It was a gentle cycle, a rhythm that followed the body rather than the clock. Now consider the bedding itself. In shared sleeping spaces, bedding was often practical rather than luxurious. Straw mattresses were common. These were simple sacks filled with dry straw. They provided some softness, but over time they could become flat and uneven. Families would occasionally replace the straw to keep the bedding usable. Wool blankets were the most valuable part of the sleeping arrangement. They held heat effectively and could be used in many ways, folded for extra thickness, wrapped tightly around the body, or shared between multiple people. Clothing also played an important role. Many people slept in simple linen garments, but during colder nights they might keep on additional layers, a wool tunic, a hood, or even their day clothes. Comfort was less important than staying warm. Now think about space. There was very little of it. Each person had only a small area to rest. Movement during the night was limited. If one person shifted, others might feel it. If someone woke, the rest of the room might stir slightly. And yet, this closeness created a shared experience. The night was not faced alone. It was something the entire household moved through together. Outside the house, the village remained dark. There were no streetlights, no glowing windows, only the occasional flicker of a distant fire. The sky above was filled with stars, clear and bright without modern light to hide them. Inside, the family continued to rest. The hours passed slowly. The fire cooled. The air grew still. And within that small shared space, sleep came and went in quiet waves. In a way, these medieval bedrooms were not just places to sleep. They were spaces of connection, of survival, of shared warmth in a world that could be cold and uncertain. And as the night stretched on, each person remained wrapped not only in blankets, but in the quiet presence of those around them. A simple, steady comfort in the darkness. As the night deepened, the small shared room grew colder, and the last warmth from the fire slowly faded into the dark. It was during these colder hours that medieval bedrooms revealed one of their most unusual and surprising features, the way people actually slept. If you were to step quietly into that dimly lit room and observe closely, something would immediately feel different. Not just the bedding, not just the closeness of the family, but the position of the sleepers themselves. Most people were not lying completely flat the way we do today. Instead, many rested in a slightly raised position, with their upper body supported by cushions, rolled blankets, or wooden supports. To modern eyes, this might seem uncomfortable, but in medieval times it was considered the proper and even healthier way to sleep. There were a few reasons for this. One belief was that lying completely flat resembled the position of the dead. In a time when religion shaped daily life, this idea carried weight. Sleeping upright or partially raised was seen as more natural for the living. Another reason was practical. Medieval diets, heavy in bread, grains, and simple foods, could make digestion slow. Resting in a slightly upright position was thought to help the body process food more comfortably during the night. And then there was the matter of breathing. Cold air, smoke from indoor fires, and dusty straw bedding could all affect the lungs. Sleeping with the head raised may have made breathing feel a little easier. Now imagine the room again. The darkness is thick. Only a faint glow remains from the hearth. And within this quiet space, shapes of people rest in these unusual positions. Some leaning slightly against bundled cloth. Some curled with knees drawn closer to the chest. Some wrapped tightly in wool blankets, barely moving as they conserve warmth. The arrangement may look unfamiliar, but for them, it was simply normal. Another surprising detail of medieval bedrooms was how little people changed their sleeping spaces. Beds were not adjusted every day, sheets were not washed frequently, and the idea of fresh bedding every night simply did not exist. Instead, bedding remained in place for long periods. Straw mattresses collected dust over time. Wool blankets absorbed the smells of smoke, sweat, and daily life. Rushes on the floor, which helped absorb moisture, were replaced only occasionally. Because of this, the bedroom environment developed a very distinct atmosphere, a mixture of natural scents, wood, smoke, wool, straw. For medieval people, this was familiar. It was the smell of home. But to someone from the modern world, it might feel overwhelming. Despite this, people still managed to rest. The body adapts, and in a world where comfort was limited, rest came in simpler forms. Now consider another quiet detail of the night: clothing. Unlike today, where people change into special sleepwear, medieval people often slept in what they already wore. A simple linen shift might serve as both day and night clothing. In colder weather, additional layers stayed on. Removing clothing in a cold room made little sense. Warmth was always the priority. Shoes, however, were usually removed and placed nearby, sometimes tucked under bedding, sometimes left beside the mattress, ready to be worn again at first light. In some homes, people even slept wearing small caps or hoods. These helped retain heat, especially in rooms where cold air settled during the night. Now listen carefully to the sounds of this space. Soft breathing, the faint crackle of dying embers, a quiet shift of straw beneath a sleeper. Occasionally a low murmur from someone drifting between sleep and wakefulness. These sounds created a gentle rhythm, a kind of background presence that filled the silence. Total silence, as we might expect today, was rare, and perhaps even uncomfortable. There was always something, some small sound reminding you that the world still existed beyond your closed eyes. Outside, the night carried its own quiet life. Wind brushing against wooden walls, distant animals moving in fields, an owl calling softly from the darkness. These sounds slipped into the room through small gaps in the structure, blending with the indoor atmosphere, creating a connection between inside and outside, between shelter and the open world. Now imagine a moment in the middle of the night. You wake briefly, not fully, just enough to notice the cold air on your face, the weight of the blanket around you, the presence of others nearby. You remain still, listening, feeling. Then slowly, without effort, you drift back into sleep. This simple pattern may have happened many times during a single night. Sleep was not rushed. It was not forced. It moved gently, naturally, like the slow passing of time itself. And within these strange medieval bedrooms, with their shared spaces, simple beds, and quiet darkness, people found a way to rest. Not perfectly, not comfortably by modern standards, but enough. Enough to begin again when the first light of morning arrived. Enough to face another day in a world shaped by simplicity, effort, and the steady rhythm of life. As the night stretched on and the room settled into its quiet rhythm, there was something else present in medieval bedrooms that most people today would find deeply unsettling. It was not the cold, not the darkness, not even the shared sleeping space. It was what lived within the bed itself. If you could look closely at a medieval mattress, especially one filled with straw or wool, you might begin to notice small movements. Tiny, almost invisible at first, but very real. Medieval beds were not as clean or protected as modern ones. There were no tightly sealed fabrics, no chemical treatments, no regular washing routines. And because of this, beds often became home to small insects. The most common among them were bedbugs. These tiny creatures thrived in warm environments, and a human bed provided exactly what they needed: warmth, darkness, and a steady source of food. During the night, when everything was still, they would emerge quietly from the folds of fabric or the gaps in wooden frames. Their movement was subtle, almost impossible to notice unless you were awake and paying close attention. For medieval people, this was simply part of life. Unpleasant, yes, but normal. There were no easy solutions. Some tried to reduce the problem by airing out bedding during the day. Others used herbs, believing their scent might keep insects away. Lavender, mint. Sometimes even dried flowers were placed within bedding. Whether these methods truly worked or not, they offered at least a sense of control. A small comfort in a world with few options. Now imagine lying in that dim room once again, wrapped in wool blankets, resting on a straw mattress. The air is still, the fire almost gone, and beneath you, the bed itself carries its own hidden life. Yet despite this, people still slept. The human body adapts. Over time, discomfort becomes familiar, and familiar things become easier to ignore. Sleep comes, not because everything is perfect, but because the body needs it. Now shift your attention slightly. Beyond the bed, the room itself held other quiet challenges. Moisture was one of them. Medieval houses were often damp. Rain could seep through roofs. Cold air carried moisture inside. And without proper ventilation, that moisture stayed. Walls could feel slightly wet to the touch. Wooden beams might swell or creak. And bedding could absorb this dampness over time. Sleeping in such conditions was not always comfortable. Cold, damp air could make blankets feel heavier. Straw mattresses might lose their dryness. And yet this too was part of the environment, part of the night. Another quiet detail often overlooked is the presence of smoke. Even though the fire provided warmth, it also filled the house with a light haze. Chimneys were not always efficient. Smoke did not always rise cleanly out of the house. Instead, it drifted slowly through the room, especially when the fire burned low. This meant that many medieval people slept in air that carried the faint scent of smoke. It settled into clothing, into blankets, into the very walls of the house. Over time, it became the natural smell of home. Now imagine the combination of all these elements. The dim darkness, the shared space, the straw bedding, the faint movement of insects, the cool, damp air, and the light trace of smoke drifting quietly through the room. To us, it might seem uncomfortable, even harsh, but to them, it was simply life. And within that life, sleep still found its place. There is something deeply human in that. The ability to rest even when conditions are not ideal. To close your eyes and drift away, even when the world around you is imperfect. Now, as the hours continue to pass, the room grows colder still. The last warmth of the fire has faded almost completely. Breath becomes faintly visible in the air. People instinctively pull blankets closer, curl slightly tighter, conserving what little warmth remains. This is often the coldest part of the night, just before morning begins its slow return, and yet it is also the quietest, the stillest. The world seems paused, as if everything is waiting for the first hint of light, waiting for warmth to return, waiting for another day to begin. And in that deep, quiet pause, medieval bedrooms reveal their true nature, not just places of rest, but places of endurance, of adaptation, of quiet survival through long and often uncomfortable nights. And still, despite everything, sleep comes, slowly, gently, and without asking for perfection. As the coldest part of the night begins to pass, something subtle starts to change within the room. It is not light, not yet, but a feeling, a quiet shift in the air that signals the long darkness is slowly coming to an end. And during this time, many medieval people found themselves waking once again, not suddenly, not fully, but gently, as if their bodies were responding to a rhythm older than any clock. This was the space between sleeps, a quiet, almost forgotten part of the night. After their first period of rest, people would often wake for a short while. The room remained dark, the fire nearly gone, the air cool and still. And yet, in this soft waking moment, the world felt different. Some people would simply lie still, eyes open, listening to the breathing of others, to the faint sounds of the house, to the distant quiet of the outside world. Others might shift slightly, adjusting their blankets, pulling warmth closer around them. A few might even sit up for a short time. In wealthier homes, where a candle might be relit, this waking period could be used for quiet activities. A brief prayer, a moment of thought, sometimes even quiet conversation, spoken in low voices so as not to disturb the rest of the household. In simpler homes, however, most people remained still, resting, waiting, allowing sleep to return naturally. This pattern of waking and sleeping again may seem unusual today, but in the medieval world it was completely natural. Without artificial light, the night stretched long enough for the body to divide its rest into two parts, a first sleep and a second sleep. Between them, this quiet space. Now imagine being there, lying on a straw mattress, wrapped in wool, the darkness around you deep and calm. You wake slowly. You are aware, but not fully alert. There is no urgency, no need to check the time, no pressure to fall asleep quickly, only the quiet presence of the night. You listen. A faint sound of wind brushing against the walls, the soft creak of wood settling, the gentle movement of someone nearby turning in their sleep. These small details fill the silence. They create a kind of peaceful awareness, a connection to the space around you. And then, just as gently as you woke, sleep begins to return. Your thoughts slow, your breathing deepens, and without effort you drift back into rest. This second sleep often lasted until the first signs of morning, and when people woke again, it felt more complete, more settled, as if the night had fully done its work. But not all nights were so calm. There were times when medieval bedrooms felt less peaceful, more uncertain, more restless. One reason for this was the simple fact that the world outside could not always be controlled. There were no secure locks as we know them today. Doors were often simple wooden barriers. Windows were small and sometimes left slightly open for air. This meant that the outside world was never completely shut out. Occasionally distant sounds would break the quiet. A dog barking, footsteps somewhere beyond the house, the movement of animals in the fields. For most nights these sounds meant nothing, but sometimes they stirred unease. In a time without modern security, people relied heavily on awareness. Even while resting, part of the mind remained alert, ready to respond if needed. This created a different kind of sleep, not fully restless, but not completely deep either, a balance between rest and readiness. Now consider another detail, light, or rather, the lack of it. Medieval nights were truly dark. Once the candle was out and the fire reduced to embers, the room would fall into near complete darkness, the kind of darkness where shapes disappear, where the edges of objects blur into nothing, where the world becomes quiet and still. For some, this darkness was comforting, a signal that the day was over, that nothing more was expected. For others, it could feel uncertain. The mind, left without clear shapes to focus on, might wander, imagining small sounds, interpreting shadows, filling the silence with quiet thoughts. And yet, even within this deep darkness, people learned to rest. They became familiar with it. It became part of their nightly world, just as natural as daylight. Now, as the second sleep settles in, the room grows even quieter than before. Bodies relax fully. Breathing becomes slow and steady. The cold no longer feels as sharp. The blankets hold what warmth they can. And the long medieval night continues its slow, steady passage. Time moves without measure. No ticking clocks, no glowing numbers, only the quiet movement of hours passing unseen. And within this stillness, sleep deepens once again, carrying each person gently toward the coming morning. As the second sleep deepens and the night reaches its most silent point, a different kind of awareness sometimes drifts through the medieval bedroom. It is not fully waking, not quite dreaming, but something in between, a soft state where the mind becomes more sensitive to the smallest details. In this quiet space, even the faintest sensations feel stronger. The weight of the blanket, the texture of straw beneath the body, the cool air brushing against the face, and sometimes the slow movement of shadows across the room. Because although the night is dark, it is never completely still. Moonlight, when it finds its way through a small window or gap in the wall, can shift gently as the hours pass. Clouds move across the sky, branches outside sway in the wind, and their faint shadows stretch and change along the wooden walls. To a resting mind, these movements can feel almost alive, shapes forming, then fading, patterns appearing for a moment before disappearing again. For medieval people, who lived without artificial light, the night carried a deeper presence. It was something to be experienced, not simply passed through. And in these moments between sleep and wakefulness, that presence became more noticeable. Now imagine lying in that room once more. The air is cold but calm. The fire has completely faded. Only a faint memory of warmth remains. The darkness surrounds everything, soft and deep. Your eyes are closed, but your mind is gently aware. You sense the space around you, the quiet breathing of others, the stillness of the house. And somewhere in that stillness your thoughts begin to drift, not in a restless way, but slowly, gently, like leaves carried by a soft current. You might think about the day that has passed, the small tasks completed, the quiet moments remembered, or perhaps your mind creates simple images, fields, trees, the shape of the village under daylight. These thoughts do not demand attention. They come and go, fading as easily as they appear. This state, somewhere between dreaming and waking, was a natural part of medieval nights. Without distractions, the mind had space to wander, to settle, to rest in its own quiet rhythm. Now consider the sounds once again. Even at the deepest part of the night, there is never complete silence. A distant owl calls from the countryside. The wind brushes softly against the roof. Wooden beams give a faint creak as the temperature shifts. These sounds are not interruptions. They are part of the environment, a constant, gentle reminder that the world continues beyond the walls, and over time the mind stops reacting to them. Instead, it accepts them, allows them to blend into the background, becoming almost like a lullaby, something that helps maintain the rhythm of sleep. Another detail often overlooked is how the body responds to the cold during these hours. Without steady heat, the temperature inside the room drops gradually. People instinctively adjust, pulling blankets closer, curling slightly inward, reducing the amount of exposed skin. These small movements happen without fully waking. The body protects itself, adapts quietly, and then settles again. Breathing slows, muscles relax, and the mind drifts deeper into rest. Now imagine the space beyond the house. The village lies silent, every home wrapped in darkness. No light escapes from windows, no movement disturbs the stillness. Fields stretch outward under a sky filled with stars, clear, bright, uninterrupted by artificial light. This connection between the bedroom and the outside world is important. Even though walls provide shelter, they do not fully separate one from nature. The night outside is always present. Its sounds, its air, its quiet rhythm. And inside the bedroom, people remain part of that larger world. Not completely isolated, but gently connected. Now, as the hours continue, something very gradual begins to happen. The darkness, once deep and complete, starts to soften ever so slightly. It is not yet light, but it is no longer the same darkness as before. The mind, even in sleep, begins to sense this change. A subtle shift, almost impossible to describe, but quietly real. The longest part of the night has passed, and though most remain asleep, the world is slowly preparing for morning. Within the medieval bedroom, everything remains calm, still, peaceful, and wrapped in that quiet, drifting state between sleep and waking. A state where time feels slow, where thoughts fade easily, and where the mind finds rest in the simplest of surroundings. As the darkness begins to soften, the medieval bedroom slowly shifts once again. It is not a sudden change. There is no clear moment when night ends and morning begins. Instead, the transition is gentle, almost unnoticeable at first. The air feels slightly different, less heavy, less still, and somewhere beyond the walls, the world is beginning to wake. Inside the room, most people remain asleep, wrapped in blankets, curled into warmth. But their sleep is no longer as deep as it was during the coldest hours of the night. It has become lighter, more fragile, easier to break. A small sound now is enough to stir someone. A shift of movement, a faint noise from outside, even the subtle change in light filtering through a window. For those sleeping near the walls, the first hint of morning may appear as a faint grey glow, barely visible, just enough to outline shapes that were once hidden in darkness. The edges of the room slowly return. The wooden beams above, the outline of a chest, the faint form of someone resting nearby. Everything begins to reappear, quietly, softly. Now imagine lying there as this change happens. You're not fully awake, but you're no longer deeply asleep. Your breathing shifts, your awareness slowly returns. You notice the weight of the blanket, the coolness of the air on your face, the distant sound of something outside, perhaps a bird, a very early call, soft and uncertain. This is the beginning of morning in the medieval world, not marked by alarms or clocks, but by nature itself. As more time passes, these small signals increase. Another bird joins the first, then another. The quiet countryside begins to fill with gentle sound, not loud, not sudden, but steady, gradual. Inside the house, someone stirs, a slight movement, a shift in position. The straw mattress rustles softly. Another person turns beneath their blanket, still half asleep, still resting, but no longer completely still. The room itself continues to change. The darkness fades into a soft grey, then a slightly brighter shade. The window, once just a dark opening, now holds a faint glow. It is enough to guide movement, enough to begin the day. For some, waking comes naturally. Their eyes open slowly. They lie still for a moment, adjusting to the return of the light. There is no rush, no sudden need to rise, only a gradual awareness that the night has ended. Others remain asleep a little longer, their rest extending into the early morning. But eventually, one by one, people begin to wake. Now consider the temperature. Morning is often one of the coldest times of the day. The fire has completely burned out. The warmth of the night is gone, and the air feels sharp. Breath may be visible in the dim light. People instinctively pull blankets tighter around themselves, delaying the moment they must leave the warmth of their bedding, because once they rise, the cold will be felt more strongly. This creates a quiet pause, a moment where people remain still, awake, but unmoving, holding on to the last comfort of warmth before the day begins. Now, in wealthier homes, servants might already be stirring. Their tasks begin early, before the rest of the household wakes. One might move quietly through the hall, careful not to disturb others. Another might prepare to relight the fire, gathering wood, blowing gently on the remaining embers, slowly bringing warmth back into the space. This act of relighting the fire is important. It marks the true beginning of the day. Light returns, warmth returns, and with them, activity begins. In simpler homes, the process is similar but slower. The first person to wake might take on this task, carefully tending to the hearth, coaxing flame from ash, bringing the room back to life. Now the bedroom, once still and quiet, begins to fill with small movements. Blankets are shifted. People sit up slowly, stretching, adjusting to the cold air. Children may remain curled for a little longer, reluctant to leave the warmth, but even they will soon rise, because the day ahead requires it. Life in the medieval world is not slow once morning begins. There is work to be done, animals to tend, food to prepare, fields to manage. But for a few moments longer, the bedroom remains in this in-between state, not fully asleep, not fully awake, a gentle transition, a quiet bridge between night and day. And within that space there is a kind of peace, a final moment of stillness, before movement returns, before voices fill the room, before the rhythm of daily life begins again. The medieval bedroom, with all its simplicity and strangeness, slowly releases its hold on the night, and prepares, once more, for the coming day. As the first real light of morning begins to enter the room, the medieval bedroom no longer feels like the quiet, enclosed world it was during the night. Shadows that once filled every corner slowly disappear. The shapes of objects become clearer. The wooden beams above, the rough texture of the walls, the scattered bedding across the floor. Everything returns to view, simple and unchanged. But now there is movement. A quiet beginning at first. Someone sits up, pulling a blanket tightly around their shoulders. Another person stretches slowly, adjusting stiff muscles after a long night on a firm mattress. The air is cold, much colder than it was when they first lay down to sleep. This is one of the small but important realities of medieval mornings. Without a constant fire, warmth does not last, so the first moments after waking are often spent gathering warmth again. Hands are rubbed together, blankets are wrapped more tightly, and slowly, attention turns toward the hearth. The fire, now reduced to ash and faint embers, waits to be brought back to life. Whoever rises first takes on this task. Kneeling near the hearth, they carefully move the ashes aside, searching for any remaining glow. Even the smallest ember can be enough. Dry kindling is placed gently, a few small sticks arranged above it, and then, with slow and steady breaths, air is blown into the ash. At first, nothing seems to happen. Then, a faint glow returns, a tiny spark of orange, encouraging, alive. More air is added, more care. until finally a small flame appears, weak at first, then stronger. Gradually the fire begins again. This moment is quiet but important. It marks the true return of warmth to the house, and with it, the bedroom begins to feel less like a place of sleep and more like a space of activity. Now, others begin to rise, one by one, slowly leaving their bedding behind. Straw mattresses are adjusted, blankets are folded or set aside. Not neatly, as we might expect today, but simply moved enough to clear space. The room itself does not change much in appearance. There is no full reset, no deep cleaning each morning. Life continues within the same space, carrying forward from the day before. Clothing, often worn through the night, is adjusted rather than changed. A cloak might be pulled on, a hood raised. Layers are added to protect against the morning cold. There is no separate wardrobe for sleep and day. Everything blends together. Now consider the light. As the sun rises higher, more of it enters the room, through a small window, through gaps in wood. It spreads slowly across the floor, revealing details that were hidden in darkness. Dust in the air, the texture of straw, the worn surfaces of wood, the marks of daily life. In wealthier homes, windows might have thin coverings or small panes, but in simpler houses, light enters freely, bringing with it a sense of openness, a connection to the outside world. And with that light comes sound. The village begins to wake, distant voices, animals moving, footsteps on packed earth. The quiet night gives way to a gentle but growing rhythm of activity. Inside the bedroom, this change is felt clearly. People begin to move with more purpose. A child might be guided to sit up, another encouraged to stand. There is no rushing, but there is direction. The day has begun, and with it, responsibilities return. But for a brief moment, there is still a trace of the night lingering in the room, a softness, a quietness that has not fully disappeared, the memory of stillness, of shared rest, of the long hours spent wrapped in darkness. It fades slowly as movement increases. Now, the bed itself stands empty. The place that held warmth through the night begins to cool. Blankets no longer hold the same heat. The straw mattress settles back into its shape, waiting for the next night to come. Because in the medieval world, the cycle is simple. Day brings work, night brings rest. And the bedroom, no matter how simple or strange, remains at the centre of that cycle. A place not of luxury, but of necessity. A place where the body recovers, where warmth is shared, where the quiet hours of darkness pass slowly and steadily. And now, as morning fully arrives, that quiet space transforms once again into part of daily life. No longer a place of sleep, but a room ready for the tasks of the day. With the morning now fully settled into the house, the bedroom no longer feels like a place meant only for rest. It begins to change its purpose once again. In the medieval world, space was limited. Rooms were rarely used for just one thing, so the same area where people slept through the night now slowly becomes part of daily life. Blankets are moved aside. Straw bedding is pushed closer to the wall, not carefully arranged, but simply cleared enough to make room. The floor, which only hours ago held sleeping bodies, is now open for movement. This constant shifting between uses is what made medieval bedrooms so different from modern ones. There was no strict separation between sleeping and living. Everything happened in the same shared space. Now imagine the light filling the room more completely. It reveals details that were easy to ignore at night. The uneven texture of the wooden floor, the scattered pieces of straw, the marks left by daily use. Nothing is hidden. Everything is visible. And yet, there is no sense of discomfort in this. For medieval people, this environment was normal. It did not need to be perfect. It only needed to function. Now, attention turns to the body. After a long night, especially one spent on simple bedding, muscles can feel stiff. Movement is slow at first. Arms stretch gently. Shoulders roll. People take a moment to adjust before beginning their day. There are no soft mattresses to ease the body, no carefully designed pillows. Rest has happened, but not always comfortably. And so, the body takes a few quiet moments to wake fully. Another detail becomes clear as the room brightens. Clothing. Since most people slept in simple garments, there is no full change of outfit. Instead, layers are added. A tunic adjusted, a belt tied, a cloak placed over the shoulders. Everything is practical. Everything is done with purpose. Now consider something often overlooked, the absence of mirrors. In most medieval homes, mirrors were rare and expensive, so people did not begin their day by looking at their reflection. They relied on feeling, on habit, on routine. Clothing was arranged by touch, hair adjusted by memory. Appearance was not something carefully checked each morning. Instead, the focus remained on readiness, on preparing for the tasks ahead. As the room continues to shift into daytime use, small tasks begin to take place. Someone may gather bedding and carry it to a corner. Another might shake out a blanket near the doorway, allowing dust and straw to fall away. These actions are simple, routine, done without much thought. They are part of the rhythm of life. Now the fire, which was slowly rebuilt earlier, begins to give off more warmth. The room feels less cold, more active. The glow of the flames replaces the quiet darkness of the night, and with that warmth, energy returns. People begin to move more quickly, more confidently. The slow pace of waking gives way to the steady motion of the day. But even as the room fills with movement, traces of the night remain. The slight indentations in the straw where someone slept, the lingering warmth in certain blankets, the quiet memory of shared rest. These small details fade gradually, but they do not disappear instantly. They are part of the cycle. Night leaves its mark. Day slowly replaces it. Now think about how different this is from modern life. Today bedrooms are often separate, private, used only for sleep and rest. But in the medieval world, the bedroom was not isolated. It was part of everything. A space that changed with time. A space that adapted to need. A space that carried the full rhythm of daily life. And as the morning continues, that transformation becomes complete. The room is no longer quiet, no longer still. It has become something else entirely, a place of movement, of preparation, of beginning. The night has passed, and the bedroom, once filled with darkness and rest, now stands ready for another day in a world that never truly separates living from sleeping. As the day continues to unfold, the memory of the night slowly fades from the room, but the bedroom itself does not disappear from daily life. Instead, it remains quietly present. Not in use the way it was during the night, but still important in subtle ways. In many medieval homes, there was no strict boundary that kept people out of sleeping areas during the day. The same space might be passed through many times, someone retrieving a cloak, someone placing an item inside a wooden chest, a child wandering in and out without much thought. The bedroom was not a closed or protected space. It was simply part of the home. Now imagine the room in the middle of the day. Sunlight enters more strongly through the window or doorway. The darkness that once defined the space is completely gone. In its place is a soft, natural brightness. Dust particles drift slowly in the air, visible in the sunlight. The wooden floor feels warmer now. The cold of the early morning has lifted, and yet the room still carries a quiet stillness compared to the rest of the house. While other areas may be filled with activity, this space often remains calmer, less crowded, less noisy. It becomes a place people pass through, but do not linger in for long. Bedding, though moved aside, is still visible. Straw mattresses rest near the wall. Blankets lie folded or loosely arranged. Nothing is hidden away completely. There is no concept of storing everything out of sight. Instead, the room holds its purpose openly, ready to return to use when night arrives again. Now consider how people interacted with this space during the day. In some moments, it might serve as a place for brief rest. A short pause from work, someone sitting quietly for a few minutes, not sleeping, but resting their body, gathering energy before returning to their tasks. For the elderly or those feeling unwell, the bedroom might become more important during the day, a place to lie down, a place to recover. In a world without modern medicine, rest was one of the few ways the body could heal. So even during daylight, the sleeping space remained valuable. Another detail becomes noticeable in this daytime setting: the air. Without the cool dampness of night, the room feels different, warmer, lighter. Sometimes a window or door might be opened slightly to allow fresh air inside. This helps reduce the heaviness that builds up during the night. It also allows sunlight to reach the bedding, which people believed could help keep it fresh. Though not understood in scientific terms, there was a simple awareness that air and light improved the space. Now imagine the sounds. During the night, the bedroom was filled with soft breathing and distant quiet. But during the day, those sounds are replaced. Voices from other parts of the house, footsteps moving back and forth, the occasional sound of objects being handled or moved. These sounds pass through the room, but do not stay. They remind us that this space is not separate. It is connected to everything else. Now think about how time is experienced here. Without clocks or strict schedules, the day flows naturally. Light shifts slowly across the room, from one side to the other, marking the passage of hours without any need for measurement. The bedroom becomes a place where this movement of light can be observed quietly, a silent record of time passing. And as the sun begins its slow descent later in the day, the room will once again begin to change. Shadows will return, the light will soften, and the space will slowly prepare itself to become what it was before, a place of rest, a place of sleep, a place where the long medieval night will unfold once again. But for now it remains in this calm, in-between state, no longer a place of darkness, not yet a place of sleep, simply a quiet part of the home, holding its purpose gently, waiting for the cycle to continue. As the afternoon slowly begins to fade, the medieval bedroom starts to change once again. At first, the shift is almost invisible. The bright sunlight that once filled the room softens. Shadows grow longer. The warmth of the day begins to ease, and with it, the quiet space that had rested in the background starts to feel important again. People move through the house differently now. Their pace slows slightly. The energy of the day begins to settle. Work is not yet finished, but it is nearing its end. And somewhere in that gradual change, attention begins to return to the sleeping space. The bedroom, which remains simple and untouched for most of the day, is not dramatically prepared for the night. There are no elaborate routines, no complete rearrangements. Instead, preparation happens in small, natural ways. A blanket is shaken gently to remove dust or straw. A mattress is adjusted slightly, perhaps lifted and settled again to make it more even. These actions are quiet and practical, done without much thought, part of a daily rhythm repeated over and over. Now imagine the room as the light continues to fade. The golden tones of late afternoon enter through the window, casting a softer glow across the wooden floor. The air begins to cool again, not sharply but enough to be noticed. People respond to this change instinctively. A cloak might be brought closer, a thicker blanket laid out in readiness, because once night arrives the temperature will drop quickly, and being prepared makes the transition easier. Another detail becomes clear during this time, the sense of anticipation, not excitement, but a quiet awareness that the day is ending, that rest is approaching. In the medieval world, where physical work filled most hours, this approaching rest carried real meaning. It was not taken for granted. It was needed, earned. Now consider the sounds outside. The village is still active, but in a different way. Animals are being guided back toward shelter. Voices carry a softer tone. The The distant movement of people begins to decrease. The day is closing, and the night is preparing to take its place. Inside the bedroom, this shift is mirrored in stillness. The room grows quieter, less movement, less interruption. It becomes a space ready to receive the night once more. Now think about the light again. It continues to fade gradually, from warm gold to soft grey, then slowly toward darkness. This transition is important, because in a world without artificial lighting, people rely on it completely. Their actions follow it. Their routines are shaped by it. As the light disappears, activity slows naturally. There is no need for a signal, no need for instruction. The environment itself guides behaviour. Now imagine someone entering the room during this time. They pause for a moment, looking at the bedding, at the simple arrangement, at the space that will soon hold them through the night. There is familiarity here. Nothing has changed, nothing needs to, and that consistency brings a quiet comfort. Now, one by one, members of the household begin to prepare for sleep, not all at once, not in a fixed order, but gradually. A cloak is removed, shoes are set aside, a place on the mattress is chosen, sometimes the same as the night before, sometimes adjusted slightly, depending on warmth, on space, on simple preference. Children may settle first, their movements slower as sleep comes more quickly to them. Adults follow, still carrying the weight of the day in their bodies. Now the room grows dim, very dim. Only the faintest light remains, perhaps from a small candle, perhaps from the last glow of the sky outside. And then, slowly, even that disappears. The bedroom returns to darkness, just as it did the night before. But now everything is ready. The bedding is in place, the room is still, the air cool and quiet. And once again, the medieval bedroom becomes what it was always meant to be. A place to pass through the long hours of night. A place where rest returns, where warmth is gathered, and where the cycle of day and night continues, steady and unbroken. As darkness fully settles over the house once again, the medieval bedroom returns to its quiet, familiar state. The light is gone. The last traces of evening have faded, and now the room exists in that deep, steady darkness that defines the night. One by one, the small sounds of movement come to an end. Clothing settles, blankets are pulled closer, bodies find their place upon the straw and wool. There is no perfect comfort, no ideal position, but each person adjusts in their own way, finding what feels close enough to rest. And slowly, the room grows still. This moment, just before sleep fully takes over, is often the most peaceful. The work of the day is finished. There is nothing left to do. No tasks waiting. No expectations. Only the quiet presence of the night. Now imagine lying there again. The cool air rests gently against your face. The blanket holds what warmth it can. The faint smell of wood and straw lingers in the space around you. Your eyes adjust to the darkness, but there is little to see, only shapes, soft outlines that fade into one another. Your breathing slows. The sounds around you become clearer, not louder, but more noticeable. A quiet inhale from someone nearby, a small shift in the bedding, the distant whisper of wind outside. Each sound feels separate yet part of the same calm rhythm. And then, without effort, sleep begins to arrive. Not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly, gently, like a gradual release. The body relaxes, muscles loosen, thoughts begin to fade, and the mind drifts away from the awareness of the room. This is the beginning of the first sleep, the deepest and most steady part of the night. During this time, movement becomes minimal. The room is almost completely still. Only the natural rise and fall of breathing continues. The cold of the night begins to increase again, but it is less noticeable now. The body, wrapped in rest, becomes less aware of discomfort. Time passes without being felt. Minutes, hours, all moving quietly forward. Now consider something subtle but important. Even in this deep rest, the mind does not completely disconnect. It continues to respond in small ways: a change in temperature, a shift in sound, a movement nearby. These do not fully wake the sleeper, but they are noticed in a distant, gentle way. This is how medieval sleep often balanced rest with awareness, never completely detached, always lightly connected to the environment. Now the room itself seems to disappear into the darkness. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all blend into one quiet space. There are no distractions, no sudden lights, no interruptions, only the steady presence of night. And within that presence, each person rests, in their own way, in their own position, wrapped in simple materials, supported by a world that offers little comfort yet enough. Now imagine time passing, slowly, without measure, without urgency. The first sleep continues, deep and uninterrupted for a while, the body recovering, the mind quiet, everything moving at a gentle, natural pace. And within this stillness, the medieval bedroom reveals something important. It does not need to be perfect to provide rest. It does not need softness or silence as we define it today. It only needs to offer a place, a space where the body can pause, where the mind can slow, where the night can pass. And as the hours move forward, the room remains unchanged, dark, quiet, steady, holding within it the simple, essential act of sleep, an act repeated night after night, unremarkable, yet deeply necessary. And in that quiet repetition, life continues. As the first sleep slowly reaches its deepest point, the medieval bedroom becomes almost completely still. There is no movement now, no shifting of blankets, no quiet adjustments. Only the slow, steady rhythm of breathing fills the space. The cold continues to settle into the room, pressing gently against the walls, the floor, the bedding. But within sleep, this cold feels distant. The body, wrapped in its own warmth, remains undisturbed. Time passes quietly, unnoticed, unmeasured. And then, without warning, something begins to change again. Not in the room itself, but within the people resting inside it. One person stirs, very slightly. A small movement beneath the blanket, not enough to wake fully, just enough to break the deep stillness of sleep. Then another, a shift of position, a soft exhale, the beginning of a transition. This is the moment when the first sleep begins to loosen its hold. The body has rested deeply, the mind has quieted, and now, slowly, awareness begins to return. Not suddenly, not completely, but gently, like the slow rising of a thought. Eyes may open briefly, only to close again. The darkness remains unchanged, the room still silent, and yet something feels different. The stillness is no longer as deep. Now imagine yourself in this moment. You wake slightly, not fully alert, just aware enough to notice. The air feels cooler, the blanket heavier, the sounds around you more present. You hear someone breathing nearby, steady, calm. You remain still, listening, feeling. There's no urgency to move, no need to get up. This wake-in is natural, expected. A quiet pause in the night. For some, this moment lasts only a few seconds. For others, it stretches longer, a few minutes, sometimes more. In wealthier homes, a small light might be brought back for a short time, a candle flickering gently in the darkness. But in most homes, the room remains unlit. The darkness stays complete. Now consider what people might do during this brief waking period. Some remain lying down, simply resting, their thoughts moving slowly, without direction, without effort. Others might turn slightly, adjusting their position, seeking a little more comfort, a little more warmth, a blanket pulled closer, a shoulder turned away from the cold. These small actions are enough. There is no need for more. Occasionally a quiet whisper might pass between two people, soft, barely audible, not conversation, just a few words, a simple exchange before sleep returns, but often there is no speech at all, only silence. Now think about the mind during this time. It is not as deep in sleep, but not fully awake either. Thoughts come and go, gentle, unfocused. Images may form briefly, fragments of memory, or simple, drifting ideas. Nothing stays long. Everything fades easily. This state is calm, peaceful, free from the urgency of daytime thinking. And then, just as quietly as it began, this waking moment starts to pass. The body relaxes again, breathing deepens, the mind grows still, sleep begins to return. This is the beginning of the second sleep, softer than the first, but still important, still restful. Now the room settles once more, returning to its quiet rhythm. The brief interruption fades, the stillness returns, and the night continues its slow journey forward. Outside, the world remains dark, unchanged, the stars still high above, the air still cold, and inside the medieval bedroom the cycle continues. Sleep, wake, sleep again. A pattern shaped not by time, but by nature, simple, steady, and deeply human. As the second sleep settles gently over the room, it carries a different feeling from the deep stillness of the first. It is softer, lighter, more delicate. The body has already taken much of its rest, and now it drifts in a calmer, quieter way. Breathing remains slow, but not as heavy. Movements, if they happen, are small and easy. The room itself feels slightly changed too, though nothing visible has shifted. The darkness is still there. The cold still lingers. And yet, there is a quiet sense that the night is moving forward, that something is slowly approaching. Now imagine lying there again, wrapped in simple blankets, the straw beneath you slightly uneven, but familiar. Your body is relaxed, no longer adjusting, no longer searching for comfort. It has accepted the space as it is, and in that acceptance, it rests more easily. This second sleep is often where dreams begin to appear more clearly. Not always vivid, not always remembered, but present. Simple shapes, familiar places, small moments that come and go without effort. The mind, no longer held in deep silence, begins to wander again, gently, naturally. And these dreams are not separate from the world around you. They are shaped by it. The quiet sounds of the room, the faint movement of air, the distant calls from outside, all of it blends into the drifting thoughts of sleep. Now listen closely. The room is not silent. It never truly is. A soft shift of straw, a quiet breath turning into a faint murmur, the wooden frame of the house settling as the temperature changes. Each sound is small, barely noticeable, but together they create a steady background, a kind of quiet presence that continues through the night. Over time, the mind learns to accept these sounds, not as interruptions, but as part of rest itself. Now consider the temperature again. This part of the night often remains cold, but something subtle begins to change. The sharpness of the cold starts to ease, not because warmth has returned, but because the body has adapted. Blankets hold just enough heat. Position remains steady. There is no longer a need to shift or adjust. Everything has settled, and within that stillness, sleep continues. Now imagine the outside world. The sky remains dark, but it is no longer at its deepest point. There is a quiet transition happening beyond the walls, invisible at first, but slowly real. The air outside begins to change. The night moves toward its end. Though no one inside the room is fully aware of it, the body senses it in subtle ways. Sleep becomes slightly lighter. Breathing changes. Movements become just a little more frequent. This is not waking, not yet, but it is the beginning of it. Now think about how different this is from modern sleep. Today, rest is often forced into a fixed schedule, interrupted by alarms, defined by exact hours. But here, in this medieval bedroom, sleep follows a natural rhythm. It rises and falls, deepens and lightens, without pressure, without urgency. The body leads, the night supports. Now, within this second sleep, there are moments of near waking, a brief awareness, a passing thought, a soft recognition of the space around you, but it does not last. The mind drifts again, returning to rest. This pattern may repeat several times, small waves of awareness, followed by gentle returns to sleep, each one shorter than the last, as the morning slowly approaches. Now imagine the room again. The darkness is still complete, but it feels different now, less heavy, less endless. There is a quiet sense of change in the air, a feeling that something is shifting, even if it cannot yet be seen. And within that space, everyone continues to rest, some deeply, some lightly, each following their own rhythm, but all moving slowly toward the same moment. Morning. Now listen again. The sounds outside begin to change first, very faint, almost impossible to notice. A distant bird, just one, soft, uncertain. Then silence again. Time passes. Another sound, slightly clearer this time. The world is beginning to wake, but inside the room, sleep still holds on, gently, calmly. The second sleep continues, though lighter now, more fragile, more easily broken, and soon, very soon, the room will begin to change once again. Light will return, movement will follow, the quiet stillness of night will fade into the rhythm of day. But for now, in this final stretch of the night, everything remains soft, slow, and deeply calm, a peaceful ending to the long medieval night, where rest comes not from perfection, but from rhythm, from simplicity, from the steady, unbroken flow of time itself. As the second sleep begins to loosen its hold, the medieval bedroom enters one of its most delicate moments. Nothing has fully changed yet. The room is still dark, the air still cool, and yet something feels different. Sleep is no longer deep. It has become light, fragile, easily disturbed. The body senses it before the mind does. A slight shift in breathing, a small movement of the hands, a gentle turning of the head. These are the first signs that rest is coming to an end. Now imagine lying there, still wrapped in your blanket. Your eyes remain closed, but your awareness slowly returns. You notice the space around you again, the quiet presence of others, the faint sounds of the room, the feeling of the straw beneath your body. Nothing is new, nothing has changed, and yet everything feels slightly more real. This is the edge of waking, a soft boundary between sleep and the day ahead. For a few moments you remain in this state, not moving, not thinking too clearly, just aware. The mind begins to form simple thoughts, slow, unhurried. You might remember something from the previous day, or notice a small discomfort, the position of your arm, the weight of the blanket. But these thoughts do not last long. They come and go easily, because the body is still holding on to sleep. Now listen carefully. The sounds outside are clearer than before, more frequent, more certain. Birds call again, this time with more confidence. The faint movement of the early morning begins to spread. The world is waking, even if the room is not yet fully aware of it. Inside, someone shifts slightly. Another person exhales deeply. A blanket rustles. These small sounds break the stillness just enough to signal change. The quiet of the night is no longer complete. Now consider the light. It has not fully entered the room yet, but the darkness is no longer as deep. It has softened, turned into a faint grey that is almost impossible to notice unless you are paying close attention. Shapes begin to return, very slowly. The outline of the ceiling, the edge of the wall, the faint form of the bed beside you, all emerging gently from the darkness. Now the body responds again. A deeper breath, a slight stretch. Not a full movement, but enough to wake the muscles. The stiffness of the night begins to fade. Warmth is still held beneath the blanket, but the air outside it feels cooler now. This contrast makes leaving the bed less inviting, so people remain still a little longer, holding on to that last comfort. Now imagine this shared space. Several people, each at a different stage of waking, some still asleep, others drifting in and out, a few nearly awake, but not yet ready to move. There is no single moment when everyone rises. It happens gradually, quietly, without coordination. This is how the medieval morning begins, not with a sudden start, but with a slow, natural unfolding. Now think about the mind again. As waking continues, thoughts become clearer, more connected, more steady. The soft drifting of dreams fades away, replaced by simple awareness of the room, of the body, of the coming day. But still, there's no rush, no urgency. The world outside may be waking, but inside the bedroom time still moves slowly. Now another small change. The first real hint of light touches the room. It is faint, almost invisible, but enough to shift the feeling of the space. Darkness no longer surrounds everything completely. There is a direction now, a sense of where the window is, where the outside world waits. And with that, waking becomes inevitable. The body knows it. The mind accepts it. Sleep begins to release its hold completely, and soon movement will follow. But for this moment, the room remains balanced between two states, night and day, sleep and wakefulness, stillness and motion, a quiet transition that happens every morning, unnoticed, unhurried, and deeply natural. A final pause before the medieval bedroom comes back to life once again. As the first true light of morning begins to enter the room, the balance between sleep and waking finally breaks. The darkness, which held everything together through the night, slowly gives way. Not all at once, but enough that the room no longer feels hidden. Shapes become clearer, edges return, the ceiling above, the walls, the bedding, all gently revealed in soft grey light. This is the moment when sleep can no longer fully hold on. Even those who try to remain still begin to wake, eyes open slowly, blinking against the faint brightness. The mind, still heavy with rest, takes a few moments to adjust. There is no sudden alertness, only a gradual return to awareness. Now imagine sitting up slightly. The blanket slips just enough to let the cool morning air touch your skin. It feels sharper than before, more noticeable, because now you are fully aware of it. The warmth that carried you through the night begins to fade, and with it comes the quiet realization that the day has begun. Around you, others begin to move as well, not all together, not in any pattern, but slowly, one by one. A shift here, a stretch there. The soft rustling of straw and cloth fills the room again. The silence of the night is replaced by gentle activity. Someone turns onto their side before sitting up. Another pulls their blanket tighter for a few moments longer, reluctant to leave the warmth. A child may remain curled, eyes half closed, holding on to sleep just a little more. These small differences create a natural rhythm, a shared waking, but not a synchronized one. Now listen to the sounds outside. They are clearer now, more present. Birds call steadily. Not distant or uncertain anymore, but active and alive. The world beyond the walls is fully awake, and that energy slowly reaches inside. The bedroom begins to feel connected to the outside again. No longer a closed, quiet space, but part of a larger, waking world. Now consider the light once more. It grows stronger with each passing moment. What was once grey becomes pale gold. Soft sunlight begins to touch parts of the room, the floor near the doorway, the edge of a blanket, a wooden beam above. These small patches of light bring life back into the space. They mark the true end of night. Now the body responds more fully. Arms stretch, shoulders roll, Muscles that remained still for hours begin to move again. There is a slight stiffness, a reminder of the simple bedding and long rest. But movement helps, slow at first, then more natural. Now people begin to leave their resting positions, sitting up, turning, placing their feet on the floor. The contact with the ground is cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the bedding, but it is expected, accepted, part of the morning. Blankets are slowly set aside, not folded neatly, but moved enough to clear space. The bed, which held warmth and rest through the night, begins to cool, returning to its quiet, unused state. Now the room itself feels different, lighter, more open. The stillness of the night has lifted. In its place is a quiet readiness, a sense that the day is beginning to take shape, even before any real work has started. And yet, despite this change, there is no rush, no sudden urgency. People take their time, adjusting to the morning, letting their bodies wake naturally. Because in this world, the transition from sleep to day is not forced. It is allowed to happen slowly. Now imagine standing for the first time. The body feels the shift immediately. Balance returns, awareness sharpens. The room, once a place of rest, now feels like part of the day ahead. And in that moment, the cycle becomes complete. Night has fully ended. Sleep has done its work. And the medieval bedroom, once again, begins its quiet transformation into a space of waking life. As the morning settles fully into the house, the medieval bedroom completes its final transformation from a place of rest into a space of quiet activity. The softness of waking has passed, the slow stretching, the lingering stillness. All of it fades as people begin to move with more purpose, not rushed, but steady, intentional. Now imagine the room in this moment. Light fills it more completely. The pale gold of early morning grows stronger, reaching further across the floor and walls. Details that were hidden in the dim light are now clear. The scattered straw near the bedding, the worn edges of wooden boards, the marks left by years of daily use. Nothing in the room is untouched by time. Everything shows its purpose. Now attention turns again to the bedding. What was used through the night is slowly moved aside. A blanket lifted and placed near the wall. A mattress pushed back into a corner. Not carefully arranged, but simply cleared enough to open the space. There is no concept of a perfectly made bed. No need for neatness in the way we understand it today. The room is shaped by function, not appearance. Now the floor becomes active. Feet move across it. Cold at first, but quickly familiar. Each step marks the full return to waking life. People begin to move in and out of the room more freely. The bedroom is no longer quiet or separate. It becomes part of the household once again. Someone may step inside briefly to collect an item. Another may pass through without stopping. The space is open, shared, connected. Now consider the body again. Fully awake now, it begins to prepare for the day. Clothing is adjusted, layers added, simple garments pulled into place. There is no large change from night to day, only small shifts. A belt tightened, a cloak draped over the shoulders, enough to face the morning air. Hair is smoothed by hand, not styled, not carefully arranged, just adjusted enough to feel ready. Without mirrors, appearance is guided by habit, not reflection. Now think about the atmosphere of the room. It is no longer quiet in the same way. Sounds move through it constantly. Footsteps, soft voices from nearby spaces, the crackle of a newly lit fire in another part of the house. These sounds do not belong to the bedroom alone. They are part of the entire home, and the room simply receives them as they pass. Now imagine a moment of pause. Someone stands near the doorway, looking back into the room. Just for a second. The bedding, the light, the space that held the entire night. There is nothing remarkable about it, nothing that stands out, and yet it carries the memory of rest, of shared sleep, of quiet hours passed in darkness. Then the moment ends, they turn away and step into the day. Now the bedroom begins to empty, not completely, but enough that its role shifts once more. It becomes a background space again, quiet, still, waiting. The cycle is completed. Night to morning, sleep to waking, stillness to movement. And now the room rests in this new state, holding the shape of what has passed, ready, without effort, to return to it again. Because in the medieval world, nothing is separated. Everything flows, everything repeats. The bedroom is not just a place to sleep. It is part of life itself, changing with time, adapting with need, remaining constant in purpose. Now consider the outside world again. The village is alive, movement everywhere, people beginning their work, animals stirring. The quiet of the night replaced by the rhythm of the day. And inside the house, the bedroom no longer holds attention. It has done its part. Now it waits, silent, unchanged, until the light fades once more, until the evening returns, until the blankets are pulled close again, and the long medieval night begins anew. As the day slowly moves forward and begins its long arc toward evening once again, the medieval bedroom remains quiet in the background, unchanged yet always present. It has already played its role for the night and morning. Now it waits, not actively, not with purpose, but simply as a space ready to receive whatever comes next. This quiet waiting is part of what makes the medieval bedroom so different from modern ones. It is not separated from life. It is woven into it, always there, always part of the rhythm. Now imagine the passing of hours. The bright light of midday fades into the softer tones of afternoon. The warmth of the sun begins to ease. Shadows stretch slowly across the ground outside. And inside the house, that change is felt once again. Even before anyone steps into the room, the bedroom begins to shift. The air cools slightly. The light entering through the window becomes softer, less direct, more gentle. This is the beginning of the return, the quiet signal that the day is moving toward its end. Now think about how naturally this cycle repeats. There are no reminders, no clocks marking the time, only the environment itself, light, temperature, sound, all guiding the rhythm of life. And the bedroom responds to these changes without needing to be prepared in any elaborate way. It simply becomes what it needs to be, again and again. Now imagine someone stepping into the room as the evening approaches. They do not rush, they do not stop for long, but their presence marks the beginning of a transition. A blanket may be lifted, shaken gently, a mattress adjusted slightly, the same small actions repeated from the day before, from every day before. There is comfort in this repetition, a quiet familiarity, nothing unexpected, nothing uncertain. Now consider what this space represents. It is not luxury, it is not comfort in the modern sense, but it is reliable, consistent, always there at the end of the day. And in a world filled with hard work and physical effort, that consistency matters. Now the light continues to fade, from soft gold to pale grey, from grey to dim shadow. The room slowly returns to the state it held the night before, but it never feels exactly the same. Each day leaves something behind, a slight shift in bedding, a small mark on the floor, a trace of use. These details are subtle, but they are real. They remind us that this is a lived-in space, a place shaped by daily life. Now imagine the sounds outside. They begin to quiet again, just as they did the evening before. Voices grow softer, movement slows, the world prepares for rest, and inside the bedroom, that same preparation unfolds. People return, one by one, carrying the weight of the day with them. Their movements are slower now, more deliberate. The energy of morning has faded. replaced by a quiet need for rest. Now the room begins to fill again, not crowded, but shared, familiar, each person finding their place without needing to think about it. There is no discussion, no arrangement, only habit, memory, the natural understanding of space. Blankets are pulled close, bodies settle onto the straw. The room grows dim, then dark, once again. Now imagine lying there as the cycle completes, the same cool air, the same quiet sounds, the same simple surroundings, and yet there is a sense of completion. The day has passed, work is done, the body is ready to rest. Now the night begins again, just as it did before, slowly, gently, without force. The medieval bedroom returns to its true purpose, a place where time slows, where the body recovers, where the mind drifts, and where the long hours of darkness pass in quiet rhythm. There is no perfect comfort here, no complete silence, no separation from the world outside, and yet there is something deeply steady about it, something reliable, something human. Because in the end, the medieval bedroom is not defined by what it lacks, but by what it provides, a place, a pause, a rhythm that continues without interruption, night after night, day after day, unchanged in its purpose, unbroken in its cycle, and as sleep returns once more, the room fades into darkness again, holding within it the same quiet story, repeated endlessly, simple, steady, and at peace.